It was the night of the proposal, a night I would never forget. The room was bathed in the soft glow of candles, a sea of red roses surrounding James as he knelt before me, holding a ring that shimmered under the lights. The air was thick with anticipation, and yet, as I looked at James, I felt nothing but dread. My heart pounded, not from excitement, but from the weight of the decision I had already made. I had been carrying a secret, one that would change everything between us. The truth that had been eating me up inside, one that could destroy James' world and my own. Olivia, the woman he truly loved, was standing not far away, her hands gently resting on her belly. She was pregnant. And somehow, it was my pregnancy that had caused her to lose everything. Her health, her happiness, and eventually, her life. I watched as James' eyes burned with impatience, but there was a hint of something darker in them, resentment, maybe even hatred. The truth was, he had already made up his mind about me. Olivia was gone, and I was to blame. He had never forgiven me for what had happened to her, and now, as I stood there, preparing to say yes to a proposal I never wanted, I knew I had to do something drastic. "I can't do this," I said, my voice barely above a whisper, but loud enough for him to hear. James' eyes flickered with confusion, and for a brief moment, I thought he might understand. But then, as if the words had ever left my mouth, he persisted. "You can't back out now, Ava. This is what you wanted. Our families?" "No," I interrupted, stepping back. "This isn't what I want. I can't marry you, James. I won't be part of this lie anymore." The crowd around us fell into an uncomfortable silence, the kind of silence that echoes in your ears, making you wish you could vanish into the floor. And yet, I didn't back down. My heart raced as I reached for Olivia, pulling her gently toward James. "Olivia is pregnant. Since you love her so much, you don't mind being a stepfather, do you?" I watched as James' face transformed. His expression froze, eyes wide with disbelief, as if the words had physically struck him. For a moment, there was silence. Olivia, who had been standing beside me, now seemed like a ghost in the room. James, unable to hide his fury, stood up, grabbing my arm. "What do you think you're doing?" He spat, his grip tightening. "You're trying to ruin me, aren't you?" I shrugged, pretending indifference. "I'm just helping you get what you've always wanted, James." His face twisted in anger as he pushed me away, and I could see the hatred in his eyes, the same hatred that had grown since Olivia's tragic fate had been sealed. It was all my fault, and he would never let me forget it. But this time, things were different. This time, I wasn't going to stay silent. This time, I had a plan, one that would change the course of my life, and maybe even his. "I'll talk to your parents," I added, my voice steely. "I won't make things difficult for you. But you need to think about what you really want, because I'm not the one who's going to stand in your way anymore." The air in the room was still thick with tension. I could feel the eyes of the guests upon me, their gazes heavy with judgment. This wasn't just any evening, this was supposed to be the night where James proposed, where we were supposed to start a future together, surrounded by family and friends. But now, I had shattered that illusion. I stood there, motionless, as James' grip on my arm tightened, his fury evident in every muscle of his body. His face was flushed with anger, his lips trembling as he struggled to form the words that could never fully capture the torment he felt inside. He had loved Olivia with all his heart, and here I was, ruining it all with one simple sentence. I had never intended to hurt him, but it seemed that was exactly what I had done. "Let go of me, James," I said, my voice low but firm. I'm not going to pretend anymore. He didn't release me immediately. Instead, he held me there, his eyes burning with accusations. His breath was ragged, and for a moment, I thought he might strike me. But he didn't. He just stood there, staring at me as though I had turned into a complete stranger. "You've lost your mind, Ava," he muttered, his voice barely audible. "How could you, after everything?" His words hit me like a slap. After everything? What did he mean by that? What had he truly seen in me all this time? I had never been the perfect girlfriend. I knew that. But I had tried to make him happy. I had tried to live up to the expectations of our families, of the future that everyone thought we should have. But I was tired. I was tired of being the person who was constantly in the background, the one who had to bend and twist to fit into a mold that wasn't mine. And now, I was standing in front of him, revealing the truth, revealing that I could no longer pretend to be someone I wasn't. James finally released my arm, pushing me away with a sharp jerk. I stumbled back, but managed to catch myself. His eyes were wide, filled with disbelief and anger. He looked at Olivia, who was still standing nearby, her hand placed gently on her growing belly. It was a small gesture, one that carried so much weight. She had come into our lives as a complication, a twist of fate that none of us had asked for. I didn't look at Olivia. Instead, I focused on James. "You love her, don't you? Then take care of her. Be the stepfather she needs." The words came out sharper than I had intended, but there was no turning back now. I wasn't going to stand there and play the role of the heartbroken fiancé anymore. This wasn't my story to tell. It never had been. James's face twisted in confusion, and for a brief moment, I saw something other than anger, fear. He was afraid. He was afraid of what this meant for him, for his future, and for Olivia. He had been so sure of his path, so sure of the life he had envisioned with her, and now everything was crumbling around him. I could see it in his eyes. His whole world had been turned upside down in a matter of minutes. "Why are you doing this, Ava?" he asked, his voice shaky, as though the weight of my words had finally settled into his mind. "Why now? Why couldn't you just keep quiet, for once?" I shook my head, my heart pounding in my chest. "Because I can't live a lie anymore, James. I can't pretend to be someone I'm not just to please everyone else. I deserve better than that." James took a step toward me, his face a mixture of frustration and hurt. "And what about me, huh? What about what I want? I never asked for any of this. You think I wanted this to happen?" His voice grew louder with each word, and I could feel the anger radiating off of him like a storm waiting to break. "I ever asked for it either," I said quietly, my voice barely above a whisper. "But here we are. I didn't choose this, James. I didn't choose to get pregnant. I didn't choose to be the one caught in the middle of your mess. But I'm not going to sit here and pretend like I'm not part of it." There was a long silence between us, a silence that stretched on until it became unbearable. I could hear my heartbeat in my ears, thumping in time with the tension in the room. The people around us had become nothing but blurred shapes, their whispers drowned out by the ringing in my ears. The only thing that mattered now was the decision I had made. The decision to take control of my life and stop letting others dictate my future. James finally spoke, his voice low and resigned. "I don't what to say to you anymore, Ava. I don't know what to do with all of this." I looked at him, my eyes filled with a mixture of sadness and resolve. You don't have to say anything. You don't have to do anything. You've already made your choice. And so have I. With that, I turned and walked away, leaving him standing there, a man broken by his own decisions. The room was still, the sound of my footsteps echoing in my mind as I made my way out of the circle of roses and candles. I didn't look back. I couldn't. The next few days were a blur. Everything seemed to happen in a haze of confusion, guilt, and anger. James tried to contact me, tried to explain himself, but I ignored him. I couldn't bring myself to listen to his excuses, to hear the words he used to justify the life he had chosen. It didn't matter anymore. It was too late for apologies. It was too late for explanations. But even as I tried to distance myself from James and Olivia, I couldn't escape the feeling. That I was still trapped in their world. I had been a pawn in their game for so long, and now that I had finally made a move of my own, I didn't know what to do with the consequences. I didn't know how to free myself from the tangled web of lies and deceit that had become my life. And then, on the third day after the proposal, everything changed. I received a message from an unknown number. At first, I hesitated. I knew it had to be James, trying again to apologize, trying to convince me that he had made the wrong choice. But something about the message felt different. The words were harsh, almost accusatory. You're a murderer, Ava. You killed Olivia. You ruined everything. Now you have to live with the consequences. The message was signed with a name I didn't recognize, Ethan. My heart skipped a beat as I read the words over and over, the weight of them sinking deep into my chest. Who was this person? And why were they blaming me for what had happened to Olivia? I couldn't help it. I had to know more. I had to find out who Ethan was and why he was blaming me. This message felt like a new twist in the story, one I hadn't seen coming. And I had to figure out how it fit into the puzzle of my life. The words of the message haunted me long after I had read them. You killed Olivia. You ruined everything. Now you have to live with the consequences. I couldn't shake them off, no matter how hard I tried. The phone buzzed again, another message from the same number. My stomach tightened, and a chill ran down my spine. I had to know what this was all about. I didn't want to open it. I told myself I was better off leaving the message unanswered, but curiosity gnawed at me like a constant ache. I unlocked my phone with trembling fingers and tapped the message. The screen flashed bright, and my eyes skimmed the words quickly. Do you really think you're free now? That by pushing Olivia into James's arms, you've won? No, Ava. The truth is far worse than you think. James isn't the only one who's been hurt. You've ruined everyone's lives. Olivia's, James's, and your own. I gasped. Who was this Ethan? How did he know so much? Why did he blame me for everything that had happened? The message ended with a single line that made my blood run cold. If you want to know the truth, meet me. I'll be waiting at the old cafe by the river. Tomorrow, 5 p.m. My heart pounded in my chest. Should I go? I had no idea who this person was, and part of me wanted to run in the opposite direction, to ignore everything and try to move on with my life. But another part of me, the part that had always been curious, that had always sought answers, compelled me to go. The next day, I found myself standing outside the cafe by the river, the wind picking up and making the autumn leaves swirl around me. The sun was beginning to set, casting a warm golden hue over everything. It should have been peaceful, beautiful even, but my mind was anything but at ease. I was waiting for the unknown, for the person who had somehow tied my fate to theirs in ways I didn't understand. I stepped inside the small, rustic cafe, the sound of the doorbell jingling softly as I entered. The air was thick with the smell of fresh coffee and baked goods, but it didn't calm me. My eyes scanned the room, and my gaze fell on a figure sitting by the window, a shadowy figure in a dark coat. I knew it was him, Ethan. My gut told me I was right. I walked toward the table, my feet heavy with dread. The closer I got, the more my nerves flared. Who was this man? Why was he here, and what was his connection to everything that had happened? My thoughts were a whirlwind of confusion and fear. He looked up as I approached, and his piercing eyes met mine. There was something unsettling about him, something familiar yet foreign. He didn't smile, didn't offer any words of comfort. He simply motioned for me to sit down. "I see you came," he said quietly, his voice low and controlled. "I knew you would." I took a seat across from him, unsure of what to say. I couldn't read his expression, but there was something in his eyes that made me feel exposed, like he could see through me. "Who are you?" I asked, my voice betraying my anxiety. "Why are you doing this? Why are you blaming me for everything?" Ethan sighed, his fingers drumming lightly on the table as he studied me. "You really don't understand, do you? You think you can just push people around, manipulate them, and that you'll be left with a happy ending? Well, that's not how it works." I leaned forward, my heart racing. "What are you talking about? I never asked for any of this. I never wanted things to turn out this way." He leaned back in his chair, his gaze unwavering. "Maybe you didn't ask for it, but you definitely played a part in it. You see, Ava, you've always been the one pulling the strings, whether you realized it or not. It's not just Olivia who has suffered. It's James too, and it's you." I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. I didn't do anything to hurt James. No, Ethan interrupted, his voice cutting through mine. "You didn't hurt him physically. But you manipulated him. You used your pregnancy as a weapon. You pushed him into a corner, made him choose between you and Olivia. And now look where we are." I shook my head, feeling the heat rise in my cheeks. I never wanted any of this to happen. I thought I was doing the right thing by pushing him toward Olivia, by giving them a chance to be together. Ethan's eyes narrowed, and he leaned in closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. "You think Olivia's death was your fault? You think James is the victim here? No, Ava. You're the one who destroyed everything. And now, you're the one who has to live with the consequences." I recoiled, my breath catching in my throat. "What do you mean? What consequences?" Ethan's lips curled into a small, knowing smile. "You'll find out soon enough. Trust me, you're not as innocent as you think. You've been living in a bubble, thinking you can escape the mess you've created. But sooner or later, the truth always comes out." My mind raced as I tried to process his words. Was he threatening me? Or was he telling me something important? I couldn't tell. The more he spoke, the more it felt like he was weaving a web, one that I was trapped in without even realizing it. "I don't understand," I muttered, shaking my head. "I don't understand what you want from me." Ethan leaned back in his chair, his expression softening for the first time. "What I want, Ava, is for you to finally see the truth. The whole truth. About yourself. About James. About Olivia. You've been lying to yourself for so long, pretending like you're not part of this mess. But you are. He stood up, his eyes locking with mine as he spoke his final words. You'll have to choose now. Choose who you want to be. Because in the end, Eva, no one gets away without facing their actions. He turned and walked away, leaving me alone at the table, the weight of his words crushing me. I sat there, my hands trembling. As I clutched my cup of coffee, which had long since cooled. Ethan's words echoed in my mind, their weight pressing down on me with each passing second. You think you can escape the mess you've created, but sooner or later, the truth always comes out. What truth? I had already lived through so much, and yet it felt like there was still so much I didn't understand. I had pushed James and Olivia together, thinking I was doing the right thing. But now, sitting in this quiet, dimly lit cafe, it seemed like I was the one who had caused all the destruction. I stood up abruptly, my mind in a whirlwind. I had to get out of here, out of this place where everything was a lie, a twisted game of fate. But no matter how far I ran, I couldn't escape the truth. I couldn't escape the knowledge that I had been part of something that led to Olivia's tragic end. The walk back to my apartment felt like a blur, my thoughts clouded with confusion and guilt. The world around me seemed muted, as if I were walking through a dream. Everything felt surreal, as though the ground beneath me might give way at any moment. But the truth still lingered, its shadow hanging over me like a heavy fog. When I finally reached my apartment, I collapsed onto the couch, my body exhausted but my mind wide awake. I couldn't stop thinking about Ethan and the cryptic message he had sent me. I needed to know more. I needed answers. But who could I trust? James? Olivia? No, they were both tangled in their own web of lies, and I had played a part in it. The phone buzzed again. I almost didn't want to answer, afraid it was another message from Ethan, another taunt, another reminder of my guilt. But curiosity got the better of me, and I picked it up. It was a message from James. Meet me at the park tonight. I need to talk to you. Please. I stared at the message, the weight of his words sinking in. I had been avoiding him for days, had been too afraid to face him after what had happened at the proposal. I didn't know if I was ready to face him again, to confront the truth about everything that had happened. But I knew I couldn't keep running from him either. With a sigh, I stood up and grabbed my jacket. The night was cold, and the chill in the air seemed to match the unease in my heart. I wasn't sure what to expect, but one thing for certain, nothing would ever be the same again. The park was quiet when I arrived, the trees swaying gently in the breeze, their bare branches casting long shadows across the path. I walked through the park, my footsteps soft against the ground, until I spotted James sitting on a bench in the distance. He looked lost, his face tired, his posture slumped as though the weight of the world were resting on his shoulders. When he saw me, his face lit up with something that could have been relief or maybe desperation. He stood up, his hands slightly shaking as he ran them through his hair. Ava, he said softly, his voice filled with emotion. I need to explain. I stopped a few feet away from him, my eyes avoiding his. Explain what, James? There's nothing left to explain. You chose her. He flinched at my words, his face falling as though I had struck him. Ava, it's not like that. You know it's not. I shook my head, trying to keep my emotions in check. You don't get it, do you? You've been so consumed with Olivia, so focused on fixing her life, that you never stopped to think about mine. You never stopped to think about what you were doing to me." James stepped closer, his hand reaching out as though he wanted to touch me, but I pulled back. I couldn't let him touch me. Not now. Not after everything. "I never wanted to hurt you," he said, his voice cracking. I thought I was doing the right thing. I thought I could fix things, that I could save her. But I see now how wrong I was. And I see how wrong I've been about everything, about you, about us. My heart ached as I listened to him, but I couldn't let myself feel sorry for him. Not anymore. You've already made your choice, James. You can't keep coming to me now and asking for forgiveness. You can't keep pretending like you didn't abandon me for her." He took a step back, his expression stricken. "Ava, please. I need you to understand. I never stopped loving you. I didn't know how to love you both, and I made the wrong choice. I see that now." I took a deep breath, my anger bubbling up inside me. You can't just go around hurting people and then expect them to forgive you, James. You've hurt me, you've hurt Olivia, and now you're hurting yourself. There was silence between us for a long moment. The wind rustled the leaves, and the only sound that filled the air was the distant hum of the city. It felt like the world had stopped moving, like we were suspended in time. Finally, James spoke again, his voice barely above a whisper. "I can't undo what I've done, Ava. But I can't keep living in this lie. I don't want to be with Olivia anymore. I don't want this life." I looked at him, my heart pounding in my chest. "What do you want, James?" He swallowed hard, his eyes pleading. "I want you. I want to fix things between us. I want to make things right. Please, Ava. Don't shut me out." I closed my eyes, the weight of his words crashing down on me. This was what I had always wanted, wasn't it? For him to choose me. For him to realize that I was the one who mattered. But now, after everything that had happened, could I really go back to him? Could I forgive him? And then, a voice inside my head, a voice I hadn't expected, whispered, "Do you really want to go back to him?" I froze, the thought hitting me like a punch to the gut. Could I? Should I? Was this the right choice for me? "I don't know if I can trust you anymore, James," I said quietly, my voice shaking. "I don't know if I can forgive you for everything." His face fell, and I could see the pain in his eyes. But as he stood there, looking at me, I realized something. Maybe I wasn't ready to forgive him. Maybe I wasn't ready to go back to a life that had caused me so much pain. And yet, at the same time, part of me couldn't let go. Part of me still wanted to believe that there was a chance for us. That we could somehow fix this. But deep down, I knew that the truth was far more complicated than that. "Maybe we can't fix this," I whispered, turning away from him. "Maybe we can't go back." I walked away from James, my heart heavy with uncertainty. The cool night air stung my skin, but it wasn't enough to numb the turmoil inside me. The words he had spoken still echoed in my mind, his pleading voice lingering like an unwanted melody. "I want you. I want to fix things between us. Please, Ava. Don't shut me out." I had no idea what to do. On one hand, part of me had always wanted James to realize what he had done, to see that I was the one who truly cared for him. But on the other hand, everything had changed. Olivia's pregnancy, her tragic death, my role in all of it, nothing was the same anymore. I wasn't the same person anymore. As I walked down the street, my steps quickening, my mind continued to race. What was I supposed to do now? What did I want from this mess? There had been a time when I would have run back to James without a second thought, but now, I was no longer sure if that was the right path. I stopped at a street corner and stared at the bright city lights, the bustling crowds around me moving like ghosts in the night. I felt so alone. Surrounded by people, and yet, I was isolated. The life I had once known seemed so distant now, a world away. I didn't recognize the person I had become, the person who had once believed in love so wholeheartedly, only to have it torn apart by lies, manipulation, and tragedy. As I walked to the nearest park bench and sat down, I found myself trembling. The weight of everything I had endured was finally starting to sink in. I had been used, betrayed, and misunderstood. And somehow, I had allowed it to happen. I had allowed James to manipulate me, to make me believe that I was the one he truly loved, while all along, his heart had been with someone else. I had allowed Olivia's tragic fate to unfold without fully realizing that I was a part of it. The sound of my phone vibrating in my pocket broke me out of my thoughts. I pulled it out and saw the message from Ethan once again, a simple text, "You're playing with fire, Ava. You've made your choice, but there's still one more thing you need to know." I hesitated. Ethan had been right about one thing: I couldn't keep running from the truth. I had to face it, no matter how painful it was. My hand shook as I typed back, "What do you want from me?" The reply came almost instant. "TLY, meet me at the abandoned warehouse on 5th Street. Tonight. Come alone." The message was chilling. I had no idea who Ethan really was or what he wanted, but something in his words made me feel like I had no other choice. I couldn't just let this go, not when everything seemed to be unraveling around me. I had to know what Ethan knew. I had to understand the truth, no matter how dark or dangerous it might be. The walk to the warehouse felt like an eternity. The city around me was alive with movement, the lights flashing in a blur, but I felt like I was walking through a dream. A nightmare, perhaps. The cold wind whipped through the streets, biting at my skin as I pulled my coat tighter around me. The further I walked, the more the weight of the situation pressed down on me. When I arrived at the warehouse, I felt a cold shiver run down my spine. The place looked abandoned, the windows shattered, the door hanging off its hinges. The entire building looked like it hadn't seen a soul in years. Yet, as I stepped inside, I felt a sense of unease settle in my chest. I called out, my voice echoing through the empty space. "Ethan? Are you here?" Silence answered. For a moment, I thought I had made a mistake. Maybe it was a trap. Maybe Ethan wasn't here at all, and I had just walked into a place I shouldn't be. But then, I heard footsteps from behind me. I spun around, my heart racing, and saw a figure emerging from the shadows. Ethan. He was standing there, his face obscured by the darkness, but his eyes glowed with an eerie intensity. "You came," he said, his voice cold, yet strangely calm. I couldn't bring myself to speak. I felt the weight of his gaze on me, as if he could see straight through me. There was something unsettling about him, something that made me feel like I was the one being hunted, not the one doing the chasing. "What do you want from me?" I finally managed to ask, my voice shaky. "What is it that you're trying to tell me?" Ethan took a step closer, his eyes never leaving mine. "I want you to understand what you've done. And I want you to understand why it all happened. You're not as innocent as you think." I stepped back, feeling the coldness of the warehouse seep into my bones. You're wrong, I whispered. I've done nothing but try to fix things. I didn't ask for any of this. He shook his head, the faintest smile curling at his lips. You don't get it, do you? You've been playing a game, Ava. And now the game is over. I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. What are you talking about? Ethan moved closer, his presence overwhelming. I know everything. About Olivia's pregnancy. About her death. About your role in it all. His words were like a blade, slicing through my defenses. You think you can walk away from this unscathed, but you can't. There's no escaping the consequences. No matter how hard you try, they'll catch up with you. I felt my KNES weaken, and I stumbled backward, my breath coming in short gasps. I didn't mean for any of this to happen. I didn't want anyone to get hurt. I just wanted to make things right. Ethan took another step forward, his face now inches from mine. Making things right? Is that what you really think you were doing? You were never trying to fix anything, Ava. You were trying to control everything. And now look where we are. I felt my heart race, my thoughts spinning out of control. Was he right? Had I been trying to control everything, even without realizing it? Had my actions led to this point, this moment where everything seemed to be falling apart? You're not a victim in this, Ava, Ethan said, his voice low and threatening. You're just as guilty as the rest of them. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. I was trapped in a nightmare of my own making. And then, as if to add weight to his words, he stepped aside and motioned toward the far corner of the warehouse. Look, he said simply. This is what you've done. I turned toward the corner, my eyes widening as I saw what he was pointing at. A series of photographs, taped to the wall. Photographs of me, of James, of Olivia. And in the center of them all, a picture that made my blood run cold. It was a picture of me, standing at the proposal scene, holding Olivia's hand, her pregnant T-belly clearly visible. Beneath the photograph were a few lines of text, the woman who destroyed it all. I staggered back, my mind racing. What is this? I gasped. What have you done? Ethan smiled, his eyes glinting with something dark, something cold. It's your truth, Ava. It's all your fault. The photographs on the wall stared back at me, each one a painful reminder of the choices I had made. My stomach churned as I looked at the series of images, each more damning than the last. In picture, I was standing alongside James and Olivia, their smiles a stark contrast to the tension I felt in my chest. In another, I was standing alone, a vacant look in my eyes, as if I was already beginning to lose myself in the web I had woven. The last photo sent a wave of panic through me. It was the proposal scene, the one where I had pulled Olivia into James's arms, pretending to make everything right. But this time, there was something different in the photo. My face was frozen in an expression that I couldn't quite recognize, as if I knew something darker was coming. The words written below the picture sent a shiver down my spine, the woman who destroyed it all. I looked up at Ethan, my heart pounding in my chest. What do you want from me? I whispered, my voice trembling. The weight of his gaze felt like an invisible force, suffocating me in this place of darkness. Ethan's lips curled into a twisted smile, but there was no warmth in it. I want you to see yourself for what you really are, Ava. I want you to understand the consequences of your actions. You've been so sure of yourself, so convinced that you're the one in control. But look around you. This is what control looks like. I shook my head, feeling dizzy. No, this isn't what I wanted. I didn't want any of this. I never wanted Olivia to die. I never wanted James to hate me. Ethan stepped closer, his voice low and filled with a quiet venom. But you did, didn't you? You made your choices, and now you have to live with the aftermath. Olivia is gone. James is broken. And you? You're nothing but a pawn in this twisted game. The words stung, each on. A harsh slap that tore through the fragile walls I had built around myself. I wanted to scream, to argue, to deny everything he was saying. But I couldn't. Deep down, I knew he was right. I had manipulated the situation to my own advantage, not thinking of the consequences. I had pushed James and Olivia together, thinking I could fix things. But instead, I had shattered everything. Tears filled my eyes, and I turned away, unable to look at the photographs any longer. The truth felt like a weight I couldn't bear. I didn't mean to hurt anyone, I choked out, my voice breaking. I just wanted to make things right. Ethan's eyes darkened, and he stepped forward again, his voice colder than ever. You can't make things right, Ava. It's too late for that now. The damage is done. And you'll have to live with it. I felt a surge of anger rise within me. You don't get to tell me what I deserve, I snapped, turning to face him. I never asked for any of this. I never wanted to hurt anyone. And you're just using me for your own sick game. Ethan didn't flinch. He stood there, his gaze unwavering. You think you're innocent in all of this? You think you can play the victim when you've been the one pulling the strings all along? His words struck a chord within me, and I felt a surge of guilt rise in my chest. He was right, I hated that he was right. I had allowed myself to become a puppet in this twisted drama, pulling at the strings and hoping for the best. But now, there was no escaping it. I couldn't undo what I had done. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my shaking hands. What do you want me to do? I whispered, my voice small and defeated. Tell me. I'll do anything to make this stop. Ethan studied me for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then, without saying a word, he reached in to his coat pocket and pulled out a small envelope. He placed it on the table in front of me, pushing it toward me with a single motion. I looked at the envelope, then back at Ethan. What's this? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. You need to understand the full truth, he said, his tone final. Open it. You'll find everything you need inside. I hesitated, but the weight of the moment pressed on me. Slowly, I reached for the envelope, my hands trembling. I tore it open and pulled out a single sheet of paper. As I unfolded it, my eyes scanned the words written in neat, tight handwriting. The truth about Olivia's pregnancy, about her death, and about James's betrayal. You thought you were the only one in control, but you weren't. You've been played just as much as the rest of us. The real story is much darker than you think. My heart raced as I read the words. There was more to this than I had realized. More than just Olivia's pregnancy, more than just James's broken promises. Ethan had hinted at something deeper, something far more sinister. What is this? I gasped, my voice trembling as I looked up at Ethan. What are you trying to tell me? Ethan didn't answer immediately. He stood there, watching me, his eyes filled with something I couldn't quite read. You've been too focused on Olivia, too focused on James. But the real truth is about you, Ava. You've been hiding from it for far too long. I felt a cold sweat break out across my forehead. What do you mean? What's the real truth? Ethan stepped back, his expression hardening. The truth is that you've been part of a much bigger plan than you realize. And now that you know, you can't walk away. You can't unsee what's been set in motion. I felt the floor beneath me shift, my world tilting as if the very foundations of my reality were crumbling. No, I whispered, shaking my head. No, this isn't possible. I didn't do anything. I didn't. You did, Ethan interrupted, his voice cold and final. You did, and now you have to pay the price. The words hit me like a wave, crashing over me with no warning. I staggered back, my head spinning. I didn't do anything, I repeated, more desperately this time. I didn't. Ethan raised a hand, silencing me. You'll understand soon enough. But for now, just know this, everything you've been told, everything you've believed, it's all been a lie. And now, you have to decide what you're going to do with the truth. I looked at him, my vision blurry, my mind racing. I didn't know what to believe anymore. The world around me felt like it was falling apart, like everything I had built was being torn down piece by piece. You have a choice, Ava, Ethan said quietly, his voice colder than before. But once you make it, there's no turning back. I took a deep breath, my chest tight, and nodded slowly. What do I need to do? Ethan gave me one last, long look before he turned and walked away, his figure disappearing into the shadows. You'll know what to do when the time comes, he said over his shoulder, his words lingering in the air like a warning. I was left standing there in the dark, holding the piece of paper in my hands, my mind whirling with questions and fear. What had I really gotten myself into? The night felt colder as I stood there, staring at the envelope and the cryptic message that Ethan had left me. It was as if the world around me had shifted, and I was now standing at the edge of a precipice. What had I gotten myself into? The paper in my hands seemed to burn with the weight of its contents, a secret I wasn't sure I was ready to understand. I turned the paper over in my hands, my mind racing with questions. Why had Ethan chosen me to bear this burden? What was the bigger plan he was talking about? I had spent so long trying to figure out the twisted relationship between James and Olivia, trying to make sense of the chaos they had caused. But now, it seemed there was an even darker side to the story, one that I hadn't even considered. I felt my legs give way as the full realization of what I had to do hit me. I needed to make sense of this. I needed to uncover the truth, no matter how deep the rabbit hole went. With shaky hands, I stuffed the paper back into the envelope and shoved it into my bag. I wasn't sure what Ethan expected from me, but I knew one thing, I couldn't let this mystery fester any longer. I had to find out what was going on. I took one last look around the warehouse, the dark, empty space making my skin crawl. The silence seemed to mock me, as if the walls themselves were hiding secrets I wasn't ready to hear. I couldn't stay here any longer. My mind was spinning, and I needed to get out before I lost control. I left the warehouse as quickly as I had entered, the cold air hitting me like a slap to the face. I couldn't shake the feeling that something far bigger than I had ever imagined was at play here. I thought about Ethan and his words, "You've been part of a much bigger plan than you realize. And now that you know, you can't walk away. You can't unsee what's been set in motion." I didn't understand what he meant, but I was starting to think that maybe he was right. Maybe I had been a part of something I couldn't even fathom. Something dangerous. Something bigger than James, Olivia, and me. I walked through the city streets, the weight of the night pressing heavily on my chest. My phone buzzed again, and I pulled it from my pocket, hoping for some kind of clarity. But when I saw the name on the screen, my heart skipped a beat. It was from James. I hesitated, my thumb hovering over the screen. Part of me wanted to ignore him, to leave him in the past where he belonged. But another part of me, the part that was still hopelessly tangled in the mess of our history, wanted to hear what he had to say. With a deep breath, I swiped to open the message. I need to talk to you. Please meet me. It's important. I stared at the message, my mind torn. I wasn't sure if I could trust him anymore. After everything that had happened, after the lies and the betrayals, I couldn't bring myself to believe that he was truly sorry. But I also knew that I had to face him, that I needed to confront whatever it was that had been left unresolved between us. I typed a quick reply, "Where?" He responded almost immediately, "The park. Midnight. Please, Ava." The park again. My chest tightened. The last time we met there, everything had fallen apart. But I couldn't ignore him. Not now. Not when the truth felt just out of reach. I glanced around, making sure I wasn't being followed, before heading in the direction of the park. The walk felt longer this time, the air thicker, the night darker. Every step felt heavier, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was waiting for me. Something I wasn't ready for. When I arrived at the park, it was eerily quiet. The trees swayed gently in the wind, their shadows stretching long across the empty paths. I could hear the distant sound of cars passing on the road, but everything else seemed to be swallowed up by the silence. I spotted James standing near the bench we had sat at last time. His back was turned to me, his hands in his pockets, his posture stiff and tense. The moment I approached, he turned, his eyes wide as if he had been waiting for me for far too long. "Ava," he said softly, his voice barely above a whisper. "I'm sorry." I stopped a few feet away from him, my arms crossed protectively over my chest. "You're sorry?" I repeated, the bitterness in my voice unmistakable. "Do you really think that matters now?" James looked down at the ground for a moment, then back up at me. His eyes were filled with a mixture of guilt and something else I couldn't quite place. "I know I've hurt you," he said. "And I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. But I need you to understand something. This isn't over. Not for me. Not for us." I frowned. "What do you mean? What's not over?" "James, everything is over. I've tried to move on, to make sense of everything, but you just keep dragging me back into this mess." "I didn't choose this," James said, his voice trembling with emotion. "I didn't choose her. I didn't choose any of this. But I didn't know how to get out. And now I can't fix what's broken." I stared at him, unsure of what to say. His words sounded genuine, but they also felt like an excuse. He had always been good at making excuses, at spinning the truth into something that made him look less guilty. "I don't need your apologies, James," I said, my voice cold. "I don't need you to fix anything. I need you to leave me alone." I turned to walk away, but James grabbed my arm. "Please, Ava," he said urgently. "I know I don't deserve you, but I can't just let you go. Not like this. You have to believe me when I say I never stopped loving you. Everything I've done, everything that's happened, it's all been a mistake. A series of mistakes. But I'm trying to make it right. I wrenched my arm away from his grip, my heart pounding in my chest. You don't get it, do you? I spat. You've already made your choice. You've chosen her. You've chosen your lies and your broken promises. I'm not some consolation prize, James. I'm not going to wait around for you to figure out your mess. His face crumpled, the mask of pride and arrogance falling away to reveal something far more vulnerable. I was never trying to make you a consolation prize, Ava, he whispered, his voice cracking. But I don't know how to fix this. I don't know how to make thin GS right with you. With anyone. The silence stretched between us, thick with unspoken words. I didn't know what to say. My heart was screaming for me to forgive him, to go back to the way things were. But my head was telling me that I needed to move on, that I couldn't keep living in the past. I turned to leave once again, this time not looking back. I could hear James's voice calling my name, but it was too late. I had already made my decision. And for once, I was going to take control of my own life. As I walked away, one thing for certain, my past, my mistakes, they were behind me. Whatever came next, I would face it on my own terms. The walk back felt longer than it had any right to be. My steps echoed in the stillness of the night, each one like a hammer against my chest. The air was cold, but it wasn't enough to chill the heat of the anger that burned inside me. I had faced James, once again, and once again, I had walked away. But it wasn't as easy as it seemed. Every part of me screamed to turn back, to go to him, to try again, to fix everything. But no, I couldn't. I was done with him. Done with the lies, done with the manipulation, done with being a pawn in a game I didn't want to play anymore. I stopped at the small cafe I often frequented, hoping the warmth inside would ease the tightness in my chest. I ordered a coffee, trying to clear my mind, but it didn't work. The tension wouldn't leave. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw James's face, saw Olivia's, and felt the weight of everything I'd been through. The things I had allowed, the things I had ignored, and the things I had done to survive. I sat there, nursing my coffee, when I noticed the time, 1 a.m. I had lost track of everything. I had been so consumed by my conversation with James that the world had just slipped by. I had to get home. I had to start figuring things out. I couldn't keep running from the mess I'd made. As I walked through the deserted streets, a cold wind sweeping through the alleyways, I kept thinking about the messages, about Ethan's cryptic words. What did he mean when he said the truth was darker than I thought? And why did I feel like I was still missing something? There was a part of me that wasn't ready to give up yet. I needed to know what had really happened, and why I kept getting pulled back into this. When I finally reached my apartment, I quickly locked the door behind me and collapsed onto the couch. The silence in the room was suffocating, and the weight of the envelope in my bag felt like a constant reminder of the truth I had yet to uncover. I pulled it out again, my fingers trembling as I unfolded the paper. The words that Ethan had written haunted me. You've been part of a much bigger plan than you realize. And now that you know, you can't walk away. You can't unsee what's been set in motion. The plan. The bigger plan. I had thought it was just about Olivia, about James's betrayal, but now, I wasn't so sure. What if there was more to this than I had thought? What if I had been played all along? Suddenly, my phone buzzed. I glanced at the screen, expecting to see another message from James or Ethan, but instead, it was a call from my father. I hadn't heard from him in days. Dad? I answered, my voice shaky. Ava, my father's voice came through the line, calm but filled with concern. Are you all right? I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. I'm fine, Dad. Just, things are complicated. I know, honey, he said. I've been hearing things. I'm worried about you. Your mother and I want to help. We know you're going through a lot. I closed my eyes, his words a small comfort in the midst of everything. I don't know what to do anymore, Dad. I feel like I'm drowning. Everything's a mess, and I can't fix it. You don't have to fix it on your own, he replied gently. Come home for a few days. Let's talk. Let's figure this out together. I thought for a moment. A part of me wanted to run home, to escape the mess I had created. But I knew deep down that I couldn't keep hiding from this. I had to face it, whatever it was. I can't, Dad, I said quietly. I have to figure this out on my own. But I promise I'll call soon. I'll be here, sweetheart. Just know you're not alone, he said before hanging up. I sat in silence, letting his words sink in. I wasn't alone, even though it often felt like it. But the weight of the truth was still pressing down on me. I had made so many mistakes. I had let myself be pulled into something I didn't understand, and now I didn't know how to get out of it. Suddenly, there was a knock at the door. My heart skipped a beat. Who could it be at this hour? I stood up cautiously and peered through the peephole. It was Ethan. My mind raced. I had no idea what he wanted. Ted, but I knew I couldn't keep avoiding him. I opened the door, and there he was, standing in the hallway, his face unreadable. Ava, he said softly, his voice filled with something I couldn't quite decipher. We need to talk. I crossed my arms defensively, still unsure of what to make of him. About what? I've already heard enough from you. What more do you want to say? Ethan's gaze softened just a little, but his eyes were still intense. I know you're scared. I know you don't trust me. But you need to listen to me. There's something you still don't understand. And if you don't get it, things are going to get worse. I stared at him, trying to gauge his intentions. What are you talking about? You've been part of something much bigger, Ava, he said again, his voice low. A web of lies, of power plays, and manipulation. And now that you're involved, there's no way out. I felt my breath catch in my throat. What do you mean? Ethan stepped closer, his eyes never leaving mine. The truth is, you're not just caught in the middle of James and Olivia's mess. You're part of something that has been set in motion for years. And the longer you resist, the worse it's going to get for you. I took a step back, my mind reeling. No. No, you're lying. I'm not part of any game. I didn't choose any of this. Ethan's expression hardened, and for a moment, I thought I saw something cold flash in his eyes. You didn't choose this, but you're in it now. You need to understand what you've gotten yourself into. Then tell me. I snapped, frustration bubbling to the surface. Tell me what I'm a part of. What is this all about? Ethan paused, as if considering something. You don't really know the whole story. You don't understand the people behind all of this. But I can't tell you everything, not yet. I felt my heart pound in my chest. Why not? Why can't you tell me? Because you're not ready, he said softly, his tone serious. But you will be. Soon. Just trust me, Ava. This isn't over. It's just beginning. I stared at him, still unsure of whether to believe him. My head was spinning, my heart racing. But somehow, I knew he was right. The truth was out there. I just had to find it. The room felt suffocating as Ethan's words echoed in my mind. This isn't over. It's just beginning. His cryptic statement hung in the air between us like a sword, ready to fall. I couldn't shake the feeling that there was so much more to this than I had realized. And as much as I wanted to reject it, to dismiss him as another manipulative player in this twisted drama, I couldn't. My gut told me I needed to listen. I needed to understand. I stepped back, my mind racing, trying to piece together the fragments of truth Ethan had just dropped on me. What was this all about? Who was really behind the scenes? And why had I been dragged into this mess in the first place? You still don't get it, do you? Ethan's voice broke through my thoughts. I looked up at him, and his eyes were filled with something that looked almost like pity. But there was also a coldness to them, like he knew something I didn't, something I needed to find out for myself. Tell me what you know, Ethan, I demanded, my voice more steady than I felt. I crossed my arms in a defensive posture, trying to hide the confusion and fear building inside me. You've already dropped these bombs on me. What do you want from me? Ethan took a step forward, his face serious now. I don't want anything from you, Ava. I'm trying to help you. But you need to understand that you've been playing a part in something that goes beyond just you and James. This is bigger. I felt my breath catch in my throat. Bigger than James? Bigger than Olivia? What do you mean by that? My mind was swimming, and I couldn't keep up with the whirlwind of emotions and unanswered questions. He looked at me for a moment, then sighed, running a hand through his hair. I know you've been focused on what's been happening with Olivia and James. But this whole thing, this mess you're in, it's been orchestrated for years. You've been a pawn, just like the rest of us. I shook my head, trying to make sense of his words. What do you mean orchestrated? Who's pulling the strings, Ethan? Who's been using us? He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he took a step back and seemed to weigh his options, like he was considering whether or not he should trust me with the truth. His silence was deafening. But eventually, he spoke again, his voice low, almost like he was afraid of the words coming out. You're involved with people who have more power than you realize, Ava. They have plans that span years. This isn't just about you, James, and Olivia. It's about control, about manipulating the narrative. You've been caught in the middle of a game that's been going on for far longer than you know. And the people behind it? They'll stop at nothing to get what they want. I felt a chill crawl down my spine. This was starting to sound less like a personal mess and more like a dangerous web I had no idea I was tangled in. Who are these people, Ethan? I demanded again, trying to keep my voice steady even though my hands were shaking. Tell me who they are. What do they want with me? He hesitated for a moment longer, his eyes searching mine, as if deciding whether or not to tell me. I can't give you all the details. Not yet. But I'll tell you this much, everything that's happened to you, everything you've been through, it's all part of a much larger plan. And you're the key to making it work. I stepped back, my heart pounding. What do you mean I'm the key? I'm just trying to survive this mess. I didn't ask for any of this. Ethan's gaze softened just a little, but there was still an intensity to it that made me uneasy. I know. But you've been chosen, Ava. Whether you like it or not, you've been part of this plan from the very beginning. And now, you have to decide if you're going to keep running, or if you're going to step up and take control of your own fate. I felt a wave of nausea rise in my stomach. Chosen? This was ridiculous. How could I possibly be the key to anything? I was just a girl trying to navigate a nightmare of my own making. You're not listening, Ava. Ethan's voice was softer now, but there was a quiet urgency to it. What you do next will determine how this story ends. If you stay on the sidelines, if you keep pretending this is just about James and Olivia, you'll lose. But if you step into the game, if you take control, you can change the outcome. For everyone. I stared at him, feeling the weight of his words pressing down on me. I didn't know what to believe anymore. This whole situation had spiraled so far out of control that I couldn't even see a way out. But Ethan was right about one thing: this wasn't just about me anymore. It never had been. There were forces at play that I couldn't understand, and I had no choice but to figure them out. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my racing heart. I don't know what you expect me to do, Ethan. But I'm done being used. I'm done letting other people control my life. Ethan's eyes narrowed, and he took another step toward me. Good, he said, his voice tinged with approval. That's the first step. Now, let me help you. Let me show you how to make this work. I didn't trust him completely, not yet. But something in his eyes told me that if I didn't take a step forward, I would be trapped in this web forever. He was offering me a chance, a way out of the confusion, and I knew I couldn't ignore it. All right, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Show me what to do. Ethan nodded, his expression hardening once more. This isn't going to be easy, Ava. But you need to be prepared for what's coming. The people behind all of this, they're watching. They'll be waiting to see if you're ready. If you show any weakness, they'll use it against you. I felt a chill settle deep in my bones. I had no idea who these people were or how they could possibly have been watching me all this time. But I knew one thing for sure: I couldn't turn back now. I was in this, whether I liked it or not. Ethan stepped back, his gaze flicking toward the door. Get some rest tonight. Tomorrow, we begin. The game has started. And you need to be ready. I nodded, though my stomach churned with nerves. The night was far from over, and the next day would bring a whole new set of challenges. But whatever was coming, I couldn't back away. Not anymore. As Ethan left, the door clicking softly behind him, I stood there in the silence of my apartment, my mind racing. The truth was out there, waitin'. For me to uncover it. And no matter how dark and twisted it turned out to be, I was going to find it. For myself. For the people I had hurt. And maybe, just maybe, for James and Olivia too. But most importantly, I was going to take control. I wasn't going to be anyone's pawn anymore. This was my life. And I was going to fight for it. The next morning, I awoke to the harsh light streaming through my bedroom window, the rays cutting through the dust that had accumulated on the shelves. The room felt oddly still, as if the world outside was holding its breath, waiting for me to make a decision. I couldn't shake the sense of urgency that had settled into my bones after my conversation with Ethan. Everything felt like it was moving faster than I could keep up, and I wasn't sure if I was ready for whatever was coming next. But I had no choice. I had already stepped into this game, and there was no turning back. I stood up slowly, stretching my arms as I tried to shake off the lingering fatigue. The night had been restless, filled with dreams of twisted games, shadows, and faces I didn't recognize. It felt like I had been running in circles, trapped in a web I couldn't escape. And yet, I knew I was the only one who could untangle it. My phone buzzed on the nightstand, breaking my thoughts. I glanced at the screen, seeing Ethan's name flash up. I hesitated for a moment before answering. "Ava," he said on the other end, his voice steady but with a hint of urgency. "It's time." "Time for what?" I asked, my stomach dropping. What did he mean by that? Was this the start of whatever he had been preparing me for? "The plan," he replied simply. "The first step. You have to show them you're ready to play. You can't hesitate now." I took a deep breath, trying to steady my nerves. The weight of his words pressed down on me, but there was no room for fear. Not anymore. "What do I need to do?" "You'll find out soon enough," Ethan said. "But know this, every decision you make from now on will have consequences. Make sure you're ready to deal with them." I closed my eyes, the gravity of his words sinking in. I had been living in a world of consequences for too long. It was time to take control, to stop being swept along by the currents of other people's choices. I had to decide my own fate, no matter how complicated it might be. "All right," I said, my voice firm. "I'm ready." There was a pause on the other end before Ethan spoke again, his voice softer now. "Good. I'll meet you in an hour. There's someone you need to meet. Someone who's going to help you with the next phase." I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. Another person? Another player in this game I didn't understand? But I didn't have time to question it. I had already agreed, and there was no going back. "I'll be there," I said, before hanging up. I stood in front of the mirror for a moment, trying to gather my thoughts. I couldn't afford to second-guess myself now. The only way out was through. And I had to be strong enough to face whatever lay ahead. I quickly got dressed, choosing a simple outfit that would help me blend in, no flashy colors, no attention-grabbing accessories. I needed to be inconspicuous, to stay under the radar while I figured out my next move. I couldn't afford to draw any more attention to myself than necessary. I grabbed my keys and stepped out into the morning light. The air was crisp, carrying with it the scent of fresh rain. The streets were quieter than usual, and for a moment, I felt like I was walking through a dream. Everything was so still, so calm, but I knew that beneath the surface, things were starting to move. The game was beginning, and I had no idea what would come next. When I arrived at the designated meeting spot, a small, unassuming cafe on the edge of the city, I spotted Ethan. Almost immediately. He was sitting at a corner table, his posture relaxed but his eyes sharp, scanning the room as if he were waiting for something. I approached cautiously, not sure what to expect. "Ava," he said with a small nod as I sat down across from him. "This is it. The beginning of everything." I raised an eyebrow, trying to keep my emotions in check. "You're not making this sound any less terrifying, you know." Ethan gave a slight smile. "I'm not here to reassure you. I'm here to prepare you for what's coming. And if you're not ready, then you'll get swallowed up by this world. It's not easy, and it's not kind. But it's the only way forward." I couldn't help but feel a sense of dread creep up on me. What had I gotten myself into? Who am I meeting? I asked, trying to focus on the present. "You said someone's going to help me. Who are they?" Ethan leaned in slightly, his voice low. "Her name is Isabella. She's been in this game longer than you. She's on of the few people who knows how to navigate it without getting burned. I frowned, feeling a little more uneasy. Isabella? Who is she? And why do I need her help? Ethan's eyes flickered with something I couldn't quite place. You'll find out soon enough. Just trust me. She's someone who can teach you how to play this game and come out on top. I nodded, though I wasn't entirely convinced. I had no choice but to go along with this, at least for now. There was too much at stake to back out. As if on cue, the door to the cafe opened and a woman walked in. She was tall, her dark hair cascading over her shoulders, and her presence immediately commanded attention. She was dressed simply, yet there was an undeniable elegance about her, confidence, power, the kind of strength that came from years of experience. She spotted us almost immediately and walked over, her heels clicking sharply against the floor. Ava, she said smoothly, her gaze sweeping over me. It's a pleasure to meet you. Ethan's told me a lot about you. I stood up, feeling slightly out of place under her calculating gaze. Nice to meet you, I said, forcing a smile. Isabella smiled back, though there was something cold in it. I'm here to help you, Ava. But first, you need to understand the rules. You need to kn out how to play this game if you want to win. And trust me, if you don't learn quickly, you'll lose. I felt a chill run down my spine. What do you mean by that? She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she took a seat beside me and looked me over, almost appraising me. You've been thrust into a world of power, manipulation, and deceit. And right now, you don't have the skills to survive. But you will. I'll teach you everything you need to know. But be prepared, this will change you. Her words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken truths. I didn't know whether to feel reassured or terrified. Everything was happening so fast, and the stakes were so high. But deep down, I knew this was my only option. I couldn't let this opportunity slip through my fingers. Okay, I said, my voice steady. Teach me. I'm ready. Isabella's eyes glinted with something dangerous. Good. Let's begin. The next few days were a blur of new information, strategic meetings, and constant tension. Isabella's presence was both a source of guidance and unease. She moved through the world like a ghost, observing, calculating, always 3 steps ahead of everyone around her. I couldn't help but feel a sense of admiration for her, despite the unsettling air that seemed to follow her wherever she went. We met in various locations, cafes, offices, even quiet corners of parks. Each meeting was carefully planned, and every word spoken carried weight. Isabella didn't waste time with pleasantries or small talk. She dove straight into the heart of things, teaching me how to navigate this world of manipulation and deceit. You've been living in the dark, Ava, Isabella said during one of our meetings. She was sitting across from me at a small table, her eyes fixed on mine with a piercing intensity. You've been playing the game without knowing the rules. And in this world, that's a dangerous mistake. If you want to survive, you have to learn how to make your own moves. You can't rely on others anymore. Not even Ethan. I felt a twinge of discomfort at the mention of Ethan's name. I wasn't sure how much I could trust him either. He had brought me here, but I wasn't sure if his intentions were as pure as he claimed. Still, I couldn't afford to doubt him now, not when I was just starting to understand the scope of what was going on. I don't know if I can do this, I said, my voice wavering slightly. This whole thing is so overwhelming. I don't know who to trust anymore. Isabella's lips curled into a faint smile, but there was no warmth in it. Trust is a luxury you can't afford. In this world, trust is a weapon. You need to learn how to use it, or how to manipulate it to your advantage. I leaned forward, trying to absorb everything she was saying. So, what am I supposed to do? How do I even start playing this game? Isabella's smile widened, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of something like amusement in her eyes. First, you need to understand, that you're not alone in this. There are others, just like you, caught in the web. Some are more powerful, some less so. But they all want the same thing: control, power, influence. And they'll do anything to get it. I sat back, feeling a sense of dread settle in my stomach. You mean, they're all just using each other? Isabella nodded slowly. Exactly. It's a game of power, manipulation, and survival. And the only way to win is to understand how it works. You need to stop being a pawn and start being the player. You need to control the narrative. I absorbed her words, trying to make sense of them. And how do I do that? How do I start? First, you need to learn the players, Isabella replied, her tone turning serious. Each person in this game has their own motivations, their own weaknesses. You need to understand what drives them, what they fear, what they want. Once you have that, you can begin to shape the outcome. The thought of manipulating people, of playing them like pawns on a chessboard, made me feel sick to my stomach. But deep down, I knew she was right. If I didn't learn how to play, I would lose. There was no middle ground in this world. I had to become a part of it, or I would be swallowed whole. I'll help you get started, Isabella continued, her voice steady and calculating. But you have to understand something. You can't be soft. You can't hesitate. If you want to make it to the top, you have to be willing to do whatever it takes. And trust me, it's not going to be easy. I nodded, feeling a knot tighten in my chest. I understand. I'm ready. Isabella stood up, her gaze never leaving mine. Good. The first lesson is simple: control the flow of information. In this game, knowledge is power. Whoever controls the narrative controls the outcome. I was still processing her words when she continued. You've been given a rare opportunity, Ava. You're connected to James, to Olivia, and to a whole network of powerful people. Use that. Learn everything you can. And don't trust anyone. Not even me. Her words sent a chill down my spine. Not even you? No, she said, her eyes narrowing. In this world, trust is a dangerous thing. You need to rely on yourself, and yourself alone. I didn't know if I believed her completely. But there was something in her eyes, something that told me I had no choice but to follow her advice, at least for now. As the days passed, I began to understand what Isabella meant. The more I learned, the more I realized how much I had been in the dark. Every interaction, every conversation, was a potential battleground. People weren't just talking to each other, they were manipulating, controlling, planting seeds for future moves. I started paying closer attention to James and Olivia, observing them from the sidelines. I couldn't let my emotions cloud my judgment anymore. I had to see them as players in a larger game, not as people I cared about. If I wanted to survive, I had to stop seeing them as anything more than obstacles, or allies, depending on how I could use them. And then there was Ethan. I couldn't stop thinking about him, about the way he had brought me into this world. He was the first person who had seen my potential, who had recognized that I was more than just a victim. But was he using me? Or did he genuinely want to help me? I wasn't sure. But I knew one thing for certain: I had to keep my guard up. If I let my emotions take over, I would lose everything. I had already seen how ruthless this world could be. And I wasn't about to let anyone, including Ethan, control my fate. One evening, as I was leaving a meeting with Isabella, I got a text message from Ethan. The words were simple, but they sent a shock of adrenaline through me. Meet me tonight. I need to talk to you. There's something you need to know. I stared at the message for a long time, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. What was this about? What could he possibly want to tell me? I had learned to trust no one, not even Ethan. But still, something in his message felt different. Maybe he really did have something important to say. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for whatever was to come. I didn't know what this meeting would bring, but I knew one thing for sure: I had to stay sharp. I couldn't afford to let my guard down, not now. The game had only just begun. I texted back, "Where?" That night, I arrived at the meeting place Ethan had specified, a secluded bar on the outskirts of the city. It was the kind of place that looked unassuming from the outside, dimly lit, with a low hum of conversation floating out from beneath a weathered sign. The kind of place where people came to forget or escape, to drown their problems in whiskey or gin. A perfect backdrop for a meeting that promised to reveal truths I wasn't sure I was ready to hear. As I stepped inside, the thick scent of smoke and alcohol hit me immediately. My eyes adjusted to the darkness, and I scanned the room for any sign of Ethan. I didn't have to look far. He was sitting at the far end of the bar, his back to the wall, a glass of whiskey in front of him. His posture was relaxed, but there was a tenseness about him that I couldn't ignore. His eyes flicked up when he saw me, and he gave me a brief nod, motioning for me to join him. I walked over and took a seat across from him, my stomach tight with anticipation. I didn't know what he was about to tell me, but the way he had worded his text made it clear that something big was coming. "You came," Ethan said, his voice low but steady. He wasn't smiling, his usual easygoing demeanor replaced by a seriousness I wasn't used to seeing. "Good. You need to hear this." I took a deep breath, trying to steady my nerves. "What's going on, Ethan? What do you want to tell me?" Ethan glanced around. Briefly before leaning in closer, his voice barely above a whisper. "It's about James and Olivia. There's more to their story than you know." I leaned forward instinctively, my heart beginning to race. "What do you mean?" He hesitated for a moment, as if weighing his words carefully. Then he spoke, his voice low but filled with urgency. "James isn't just some guy caught up in a messy love triangle. And Olivia? She's not who she seems either." Ethan's eyes flicked to mine, searching for an sign of recognition, of understanding. "They're both part of something much bigger." "And you," he stopped, his gaze flickering briefly with something unreadable. "You've been caught in the crossfire." I shook my head, trying to process his words. "Caught in the crossfire? What do you mean, bigger? How is any of this bigger than what's already happened?" "It's a mess, Ethan. A complete mess." Ethan's jaw tightened, and he took a slow sip from his glass before setting it down. "That's the problem. You've been so focused on the personal drama, on the pain, that you've missed the bigger picture. They've been playing you, Ava. Both of them. And so have I, to an extent. I recoiled slightly, the words hitting me like a slap to the face. You've been playing me? Ethan met my gaze, his expression cold and unreadable. I wasn't supposed to, not at first. I didn't expect you to get involved like this. But I've seen you, Ava. I've seen your potential. I knew you had it in you to play the game. The problem is, you didn't understand the rules. You still don't. I felt a wave of anger rise in me, my hands gripping the edge of the table. I ever asked to be part of this game, Ethan. I never asked for any of this. I've been trying to survive. He sighed, leaning back in his chair as he rubbed his temples, clearly frustrated. I know. But survival isn't enough. You want to win, don't you? You want to make sure they don't get away with what they've done to you. You want to take control of your own fate, right? Of course I do, I snapped, my voice barely controlled. But you're tellin' me that you're part of this mess too? How do I even know you're telling me the truth? Ethan's eyes narrowed, and for a moment, he just stared at me, his gaze intense. Because I'm giving you the chance to change everything. You've been given a rare opportunity, Ava. You're not just a pawn in this game anymore. You can be more than that. You can control the outcome, but only if you learn to play the way they do. His words hung in the air, heavy and full of implication. But I was too shaken to really take them in fully. So what, you want me to be like them? To manipulate and lie my way through everything? Is that what you're saying? Ethan leaned forward, his voice barely a whisper now, almost as if he were telling me a secret that only the two of us were meant to know. Yes. You don't have a choice. This world doesn't care about morals or ethics. It cares about power. And right now, you're powerless. But you can change that. My breath caught in my throat, and I stared at him, my mind reeling. What was he saying? Was I supposed to just abandon everything I believed in? Was that the only way forward? Tell me what to do, then, I said, my voice shaky but determined. If I have to play this game, if I have no choice but to become like them, then tell me how. Ethan studied me for a moment, as if weighing my sincerity. Then, slowly, he nodded. All right. But know this, there are no second chances. Once you step into this world, there's no going back. You're in it for good. I met his gaze, my mind racing, my heart pounding. I understand. Just tell me what to do. Ethan took a deep breath, leaning back in his chair and glancing around the room once more. You need to get close to them. James, Olivia, they're both part of this larger plan, and you need to learn everything about them. They have connections, people who are pulling the strings. And the only way you're going to uncover the truth is by getting inside. He paused, letting his words settle. Start by finding Olivia. She's the key to understanding James's weaknesses. If you can manipulate her, you can manipulate him. I felt a surge of anger and disbelief. You want me to use Olivia? After everything that's happened? Ethan met my gaze steadily. You don't have to like it. But you can't afford to be weak anymore. You need to take control of this situation. And the only way to do that is by getting close to the people who are controlling it. I clenched my fists, trying to push aside the feelings of guilt that were threatening to overwhelm me. He was right. If I wanted to have any power in this situation, I had to learn to use it. But it didn't make it any easier. "All right," I said quietly, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. "I'll do it. I'll get close to Olivia. I'll learn everything I can." Ethan smiled, his expression a mix of approval and something darker, something that sent a shiver down my spine. "Good. You'll need to be smart about it. Don't trust anyone, not even me. This is a dangerous game, Ava. But if you play it right, you can come out on top." As he stood up and walked toward the door, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being pushed into a world where there would be no easy way out. Ethan had given me the keys to the game, but he hadn't told me what the final move would be. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized that this game wasn't just about James and Olivia. It was about power. About survival. And now, it was about me. The days that followed were filled with the kinds of moments I had been dreading. I thought I knew what I was walking into when I agreed to take part in this game, but now that I was truly stepping into the underworld of manipulation, deceit, and power, I was realizing how ill-prepared I really was. Every move I made, every word I said, felt like it could be my last. The stakes were high, and there was no room for error. Isabella's words echoed in my mind, "You can't afford to hesitate. Not now." I had to learn quickly, and I had to be ruthless. I spent the next few days doing exactly what Ethan had told me, getting closer to Olivia. She was the key to everything, and I needed to understand her better, to figure out what made her tick. But Olivia wasn't like anyone I had met before. She wasn't easily swayed, and she was clever, more clever than I had anticipated. I had to be careful not to show my hand too early. One evening, I found myself outside her apartment building. I had spent the last few hours watching her from a distance, taking note of the people she interacted with, the way she carried herself. There was an air of confidence about her, but I could also see the cracks. She was hiding something, I was sure of it. And if I was going to use that to my advantage, I needed to get close to her without alarming her. It was then that I saw her walking out of the building, her posture stiff, her face tight with worry. She was on the phone, speaking in low, urgent tones. She looked distracted, and I saw my opportunity. I approached her slowly, trying not to make any sudden moves. When she hung up, I stepped in front of her, blocking her path. "Olivia," I said, my voice calm but purposeful. "We need to talk." Her eyes flicked to mine, and I could see the flash of suspicion in them. She wasn't stupid. She knew exactly what was going on. "Ava," she said, her voice tight. "What do you want?" I smiled, trying to keep the situation light, but I could feel the tension between us. "I'm just trying to understand. Do you better? I think we both know we're not exactly friends, but maybe we should be. Maybe we could help each other." She raised an eyebrow, clearly unconvinced. "Help each other? You're just playing games, aren't you?" I shook my head, stepping a little closer to her. "No. I'm serious. You're in a tough spot, Olivia. And I know how it feels to be stuck in a situation you can't control. But maybe together, we can make things work. You don't have to go through this alone." She looked at me for a moment, and for a second, I thought she might walk away. But instead, she took a deep breath, her eyes hardening. "I don't need your help," she said coldly. "I'm handling things on my own." I could tell she was lying. I could see the cracks in her carefully crafted exterior, and I knew this was my chance. But I had to be careful. One wrong move, and I'd lose everything. "You're not handling anything," I said softly, stepping closer so that my voice was barely above a whisper. You're being played. And if you don't start paying attention, you're going to lose everything. Including James. Her face darkened at the mention of his name. What are you talking about? I smiled again, this time with more confidence. C.E. I know things, Olivia. Things you don't. And if you want to keep playing this game, then you need to listen to me. Trust me, I can help you. I can give you the edge you need. But only if you're willing to work with me. She hesitated, her eyes flicking around nervously. I could see the wheels turning in her mind. She was trying to decide whether or not she could trust me. But in her heart, I knew she was already desperate for an out. I'm not going to help you take James away from me, she said, her voice shaking with emotion. I won't let you. I took a step back, raising my hands in mock surrender. I'm not trying to take him away from you. I'm just offering you a chance to take control of your own life. You've been trapped in this web for so long, Olivia. Don't you want out? Her eyes flickered with uncertainty, and I could see the cracks in her resolve. I had her where I wanted her. I don't want to be a pawn anymore, I said, my voice softer now. I want to be in control. And I think you do too. Olivia was silent for a long moment, and I could see the conflict in her eyes. Finally, she sighed deeply, looking away. Fine, she muttered. What do you want from me? I smiled, feeling the power shift ever so slightly in my favor. Let's just say, this is the begin. Of a beautiful partnership. Over the next few weeks, I worked tirelessly to solidify my position with Olivia. I knew she was a means to an end, but she was also a valuable ally. She had connections, information, and a unique position in the game that could help me move forward. Isabella had warned me that trust was a luxury I couldn't afford, but I couldn't ignore the potential in Olivia. She was a broken piece, much like myself, but together, we could be a force to be reckoned with. On evening, as we sat in a dimly lit room, sipping wine and discussing strategy, Olivia turned to me with a serious expression. What's your plan, Ava? How do we win this? I leaned back in my chair, considering her question carefully. We need to make sure James is fully invested in Olivia, I said, but we also need to make sure we have a backup plan. If things go south, we need a way out. And we need to make sure no one suspects that we're working together. Olivia nodded, her gaze intense. So, you want to control James. And I'm just a pawn in your game. I looked at her, unflinching. We all have our roles to play. But don't fool yourself, Olivia. You're not a pawn. You're a queen in this game. But you have to know how to move. And that's what I'm here to teach you. She leaned forward, her eyes narrowing. And when we're done with this, what happens? Then we walk away, I replied, my voice cold and calculated. We get what we need, and we leave this behind. But we have to be smart. We can't let anyone know what we're really doing. Olivia studied me for a long moment, then nodded slowly. All right. Let's do this. But don't think I'll let you take everything for yourself. I'm not stupid. I smiled, the tension between us shifting. I wouldn't have it any other way. The pieces were falling into place. But even as Olivia and I worked together, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. That someone, somewhere, knew exactly what we were up to. Ethan's warnings echoed in my mind. There are no second chances. I knew I had to be careful. One wrong move and everything could collapse. But for the first time in a long time, I felt like I had the upper hand. The game was on, and I was ready to play. As the days passed, the tension in the air became palpable. Olivia and I continued to work together, slowly weaving our web of influence and power. Every move we made, every step we took, had to be calculated. There was no room for mistakes. We couldn't afford to let anyone, especially James, catch on to what we were doing. But the more we played this game, the more I realized just how dangerous it was. We had established an understanding between us. Olivia would continue to stay close to James, pretending to be the innocent, suffering woman he had vowed to protect. While I would manipulate the people around us, gaining their trust and loyalty while ensuring that Olivia's position remained secure. Together, we would slowly tighten the grip on James and everyone who had wronged us. But as much as I tried to focus on the task at hand, there was always the lingering question in the back of my mind: what do I truly want from all of this? I had told myself that it was about power. That I was playing this game to gain control of my life, to ensure I wouldn't be another pawn in someone else's game. But deep down, I knew there was something more to it. Revenge? Justice? Or something else entirely? I had spent so many years being controlled by others, my family, my circumstances, my own feelings. I was tired of being a victim. I was tired of watching others pull the strings while I sat idly by. But now that I was in the game, I couldn't help but wonder if I was becoming the very thing I had once despised. As I sat in my apartment one evening, my thoughts spiraling, I received a text from Ethan. He wanted to meet. The text was short, almost cryptic: "We need to talk. It's time for the next phase." I didn't hesitate. I knew this meeting was important. The next phase? What was he planning? And what role would I play in it? I arrived at the location he specified, a private club on the edge of the city. It was exclusive, with high walls and a guarded entrance. The kind of place where people came to do business in the shadows, away from the prying eyes of the public. As soon as I walked inside, I felt the weight of the room, the heaviness of the decisions being made, the undercurrent of power shifting beneath the surface. Ethan was already there, sitting at a table in the back corner, his face partially obscured by the dim light. When he saw me, he gave me a nod and motioned for me to sit. I did, my heart pounding in my chest. "Good to see you, Ava," he said, his tone surprisingly warm. "I've been keeping an eye on you. You've made good progress." I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. "What's the next phase, Ethan? What do you want me to do?" He smiled, but there was something in his eyes that made me uneasy. "I'm not going to sugarcoat it for you, Ava. This is where it gets real. I've set up a deal with a few of the higher-ups. They're interested in your skills. They want to see what you can do. And if you prove yourself, they'll give you the leverage you need to take control." I frowned, confused. Who are these people? What do they want with me? Ethan leaned in, his gaze intense. "They're powerful players, Ava. People who have control over industries, over money, over lives. They're watching you because they know you're smart, you're capable. And they want to see if you have what it takes to play with them." I felt a chill run down my spine. "And if I don't prove myself?" He shrugged, his expression unreadable. "Then you're out. Just like that. The game's not for everyone." I sat back in my chair, digesting his words. This was no longer just about Olivia, James, or the people who had wronged me. This was about something bigger. A chance to gain real power. A chance to control the world around me. But it also meant stepping deeper into a world of manipulation and deceit. I had already learned the rules of this game, but now it seemed the stakes were much higher than I had imagined. What exactly do you want me to do? I asked, my voice steady but with an edge of uncertainty. How do I prove myself? Ethan's eyes sparkled with something like excitement. You already can. How to play the game, Ava. You've been doing it for weeks now. But this time, it's not just about Olivia or James. It's about showing them that you're a force to be reckoned with. You need to take control of the situation. Start making moves that put you in the driver's seat. I clenched my fists under the table. I knew what he was saying. He wanted me to take things even further, to push the boundaries of what I was willing to do. And how exactly am I supposed to do that? I asked, my voice more forceful now. Ethan leaned back in his chair, his gaze cold and calculating. Olivia is still important. She's your connection to James and the higher-ups. But now you need to start thinking beyond her. You need to start thinking about your future. About what you really want. There are people who can help you get what you need, but they won't do it for free. You'll have to offer something in return. My heart raced. What kind of people are we talking about? Powerful people, Ethan said slowly, his eyes never leaving mine. They want to see how far you're willing to go. And trust me, if you play your cards right, you could have everything. The words hung in the air like a dark promise. I didn't know what to make of it. Was this the opportunity one had been waiting? G4? Or was I stepping further into a web of manipulation that I wouldn't be able to escape? I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. I understand. What do I need to do? Ethan smiled, a hint of approval in his eyes. First, you need to get closer to the right people. You need to make connections. Start building relationships with those who have influence, people who can help you rise to the top. But remember, Ava, no one does anything without getting something in return. I nodded slowly, the weight of his words sinking in. I was already playing this game, but now it seemed I was being asked to take it to the next level. It was no longer just about Olivia, or even James. It was about carving out my own place in this world of power. All right, I said, my voice calm but resolute. Let's do it. Ethan's smile widened, and I could see the satisfaction in his eyes. He knew that I was ready to take the next step. But what he didn't know, what none of them knew, was that I had my own plan. A plan that didn't just rely on them, but one that would put me in control. And this time, I wasn't going to let anyone pull the strings. The night after my meeting with Ethan, the weight of the decision pressed down on me. The world had shifted, and I was now a part of something much larger than myself. I had crossed a threshold, and there was no going back. I had promised myself that I would never again be a passive player in the game of life, but now I was entering a world where everything was a game, every person, every move, every word a calculated strategy. I woke up early the next morning, my mind buzzing with thoughts of what I had to do. I couldn't afford to wait around. The game had already begun, and I needed to take action. The first step was clear: connections. I had to align myself with people who could help me rise above everyone else, people who could give me access to the power and control I so desperately craved. I started by reaching out to Olivia. As much as I had begun to despise her, I knew she was the key to everything. She had connections, a way into James's world, and most importantly, she had influence. Whether she liked it or not, I was going to make her my ally. We met at a cafe later that day, a neutral ground where no one would suspect anything. Olivia was sitting at a table by the window, her back straight and her face carefully composed. She wasn't wearing the mask of vulnerability she had worn before. Now, she was all business. "You wanted to talk," she said as soon as I sat down across from her. Her tone was curt, but not unkind. I nodded, glancing around before speaking. "I think it's time we take this to the next level. I'm ready to help you, Olivia. I think we both know this situation isn't working in our favor. But we can change that. Together." Olivia raised an eyebrow, clearly skeptical. "You're not just playing me, are you? I'm not going to let you use me as some pawn in your game." I smiled softly, maintaining eye contact. "You're not a pawn, Olivia. You're a queen. And I want to help you take control of your life. But to do that, we need to make some changes. We need to put James in a position where he has no choice but to bend to our will." She leaned back in her chair, considering my words carefully. "You're talking about manipulation. Using him for our gain." "Exactly," I said. "This is a game of power, and right now, James thinks he's in control. But he's not. We are." Olivia was quiet for a long moment. Her eyes narrowed as she processed what I had said. "Finn. Ally," she spoke, her voice steady. "All right. I'm in. But we do this on my terms, Ava. I'm not some puppet for you to control." I nodded, understanding her hesitation. I wasn't asking her to be a puppet. I was asking her to become something more. Of course. We do this together, equally. No one gets left behind. The tension in her shoulders eased, and she finally gave me a small nod. "All right, let's make this work." Over the next few weeks, Olivia and I worked quietly behind the scenes, making sure James never suspected a thing. We played the part of the perfect couple, each of us carefully orchestrating our interactions to ensure that we both came out on top. I made sure to stay in the shadows, using Olivia to get closer to James while she kept him distracted with her pregnancy and the illusion of their perfect future together. I gripped the phone tightly, my thoughts racing. Ethan was right. If I wanted to win this game, I couldn't afford to let anyone stand in my way. Not James, not Olivia, and certainly not anyone else who thought they had more power than me. "All right," I said, my voice steady. "I'll do it." "Good," Ethan said. "But remember, once you make this move, there's no going back. Make sure you're ready." The line went dead, and I was left standing in the middle of the street, the weight of his words hanging over me. I had made my decision. There was no turning back now. I spent the next few days putting my plan into motion. I knew that I needed to strike when James least expected it. He was too comfortable in his position, too certain that Olivia was everything he needed. But I was about to change that. I began planting subtle seeds of doubt in his mind. I started by casually mentioning Olivia's past, her time studying abroad, the rumors about her ex-boyfriend. I didn't push too hard, but I made sure to let James know that Olivia wasn't as innocent as he thought. He had to question her loyalty. It was the first step in dismantling his trust in her. But I didn't stop there. I also made sure to keep an eye on Olivia, watching for any cracks in her facade. She was playing her role well, but even she couldn't keep up the act forever. And when she faltered, I would be there to take advantage. The plan was set. The pieces were in place. All I had to do was wait for the right moment to strike. The air had grown thick with tension. Every decision felt more urgent than the last. Olivia and I had been working seamlessly together, pushing James deeper into a corner while keeping our hands clean. But the deeper I sank into this web of lies and manipulation, the more I questioned whether this game was one I was willing to keep playing. Could I really go through with it? Could I betray James the way I'd planned? The path I was walking was darker than I'd ever imagined, and there were times when I almost turned back, but I knew there was no turning back now. The game had become too intense, and I had invested too much. I met Olivia at our usual cafe that afternoon, the one we'd started frequenting while working together behind the scenes. She was already seated at our usual table, the corners of her mouth curved upward in a smile that was anything but friendly. She had changed, become more calculating, more controlled. In a way, she was just like me. "Have you heard from James?" I asked, sliding into the chair across from her. She nodded, eyes flickering with annoyance. "He's been acting strange lately. I think he's starting to doubt me. But it doesn't matter. He's still under my control." I raised an eyebrow. "Is he? Or is he under your illusion of control?" Olivia's gaze sharpened. "What are you getting at?" I leaned forward, lowering my voice to a whisper. "I think it's time we end this. For both of us. It's no longer just about him or us. It's about the bigger picture now. The world we've been playing in." She paused, looking uncertain for the first time. "What do you mean?" I gave a small, tight smile. "It's time to pull the plug. James is too big a distraction. He's just a piece in the game. We need to focus on what we truly want. And that means taking him out of the equation. It's either him or us." Her eyes widened as realization set in. "You want to kill the game altogether?" "No, not kill it. Just reshape it," I said, my voice cold and decisive. "I've been working with Ethan, and the stakes have gotten higher. This is bigger than just you, me, or James. This is about power, Olivia. And I'm not going to let anyone, not even you, stand in the way of what I want." Olivia sat back, processing my words. She'd been maneuvering in the same world as me, playing the game with the same intensity. But I could see it now, she wasn't prepared to go as far as I was. Not really. The thought of fully losing herself to this game seemed to terrify her. She was clinging to the idea of controlling James, but she hadn't yet realized that true power doesn't come from controlling others. It comes from controlling yourself and the choices you make. I could see it now. Olivia was still a pawn in this game, whether she realized it or not. She had her ambitions, her plans, but she wasn't willing to sacrifice the way I was. I had to leave her behind. "Olivia, it's time to face facts," I said, my voice low and filled with finality. "You're not in control anymore. You never were. You can't manipulate this situation the way you want because you're emotionally attached to him. That's your weakness." Her face twisted in anger, but I could see the fear hiding behind her eyes. "You think you can just take everything for yourself, don't you?" I shrugged, unfazed by her outburst. "It's an OT about me taking everything. It's about doing what's necessary to win. We've been playing with fire, and now we have to burn everything down." Olivia's face softened slightly, but she didn't say anything. She was thinking, calculating her next move. She knew, deep down, that I was right. The situation was spiraling out of control, and if she wanted to continue in this world, she would have to make a choice. "You want him gone," she finally muttered, her voice strained. "You're ready to betray him, aren't you?" I nodded, my expression hardening. "Yes. Because the world isn't going to wait for us. And I'm not going to sit back and watch it pass me by." She leaned forward, her eyes narrowing with something resembling respect, or maybe it was just the cold understanding of a player who knew the game well enough to recognize that I had crossed the point of no return. "All right. Let's do it." The days that followed were a blur of planning, executing, and manipulating. Olivia and I played our parts flawlessly, feeding James enough of the truth to keep him off balance, while feeding him lies to push him further away from the reality of what was really happening. We planted seeds of doubt, stoked the fires of his paranoia, and slowly dismantled everything he thought he had built. But even as I moved forward with my plan, I couldn't shake the nagging feeling that something was wrong. My conscience began to gnaw at me, and I had to remind myself constantly of the stakes. Power. Control. The life I wanted. I had worked so hard to get to this point. But still, a small voice inside me kept asking, "Is this really what you want?" I pushed the doubts aside and focused on the task at hand. James was now vulnerable. His trust in Olivia was cracking, and I was ready to capitalize on it. I had already started making moves behind the scenes, pulling strings that would isolate him completely. But now, it was time to push him further. To break him completely. I reached out to Ethan once more. "It's time," I said. "James needs to be pushed out of the picture. For good." Ethan's response was swift and decisive. "We've been preparing for this. When the time comes, make sure you don't hesitate." The plan was set into motion that night. I had arranged for a confrontation with James that would expose him for who he really was. A weak man, desperate for control, clinging to a shattered ideal of love and loyalty. I would pull the rug out from under him, and when he fell, I would be the one to step forward as the new queen of the game. But as I stood outside his apartment, waiting for him to arrive, a strange feeling settled over me. This wasn't just about power anymore. It wasn't just about winning. I had become something else, something far darker. The woman I was becoming terrified me, but it was too late to stop now. The game had become my obsession, and I had no choice but to see it through. The final confrontation came swiftly. James arrived at his apartment, only to find that his entire world had been turned upside down. His heart raced as he took in the scene before him, Olivia, looking cool and collected, and me, standing beside her with an air of authority. "You," he spat, his voice hoarse with anger. "You've both been playing me." I smiled, the coldness in my eyes matching the venom in his voice. "James, you've always been so sure of yourself. But now, you see what it's really like to be in the game. It's not about love or loyalty. It's about power." James's face twisted with confusion. But there was a flicker of realization in his eyes. You've been using me all along, haven't you?" I nodded slowly. "Yes. And now, it's time for you to step aside. The game's over for you." Olivia stepped forward, her eyes gleaming with a cold satisfaction. "James, you're not the one in control anymore. We are." The words hit him like a slap to the face. He staggered back, his entire world crumbling around him. But as his knees buckled and he collapsed to the ground, I couldn't help but feel a pang of something I hadn't expected. Was it guilt? Regret? Or was it just the realization that I had crossed a line I could never return from? But there was no time to dwell on it. James was finished, and I had won. And for the first time in my life, I knew what it was like to be truly in control.